BTB listeners, thank you so much for checking out today's episode. Listen, if this episode inspires you, do me a favor and take 5 seconds to shoot me a like and subscribe to the podcast. There are several more exciting guests that are in the pipeline, and I just can't thank you enough for your continued support, and let's keep paying the mission forward. Let's get into it. Episode 26 of the BTB Project. Today's guest is another decorated Colorado high school tennis star. He went to Cherry Creek High School, where he was part of a legendary team that won 4 consecutive state championships, and capping off his greatest feat, winning it individually his senior year. After an impressive junior career, he got to live out his 12-year-old dream and attend Stanford University, where his junior and senior seasons, he was team captain and was a contributor to the team all 4 years. He has an impressive business background, an incredible spirit for the game of tennis, and an unbelievable journey. Jeff Zeller, welcome to the BTB Project.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby.
Welcome to the BTB Project, designed to empower listeners to identify their why and to live their best lives no matter the circumstances. My name is Coleman Gerhardt, a former athlete and motivational coach. I've had the opportunity to inspire thousands through my story and help accomplish what they are built to be. You'll be encouraged by each and every episode, and let's get into it.
Yeah, when I blow up, I'ma soar high like Peter Pan. In real life, be living out my dreams. If I'm waking up, it's in a foreign land.
It is a tremendous honor today to welcome again another Colorado tennis great to the BTB Project. I would like to welcome Mr. Jeff Zeller. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Hey, Coleman. It's great to see you and reconnect. And hello to everyone in Colorado and the tennis community.
Excellent. And, you know, it has been a small world of connecting dots. You and I both know that the tennis community is rather small, and I feel incredibly humbled to have my third Stanford connection on the BTB Project. And you've had a chance to listen in to some probably pretty prolific figures in your life with Coach Dick Gould and another Colorado local, Jeff Salzenstein. But I'd love to start your journey walking us through what it meant to get the letter in the mail. You were accepted into Stanford University, because I ironically have a son that's in high school right now, and he's a rising junior cross-country runner. He's actually set to go to a running camp at Stanford in July, and he's looking at some pretty big schools, and I've seen some of the statistics online. Just walk me through what it meant for you to get that letter and what made you have your eyes on Stanford back in the day.
It was everything. It was my singular goal since I was 12 was to go to Stanford. And I was nervous. I had put all my hopes into that basket. I did my normal number of recruiting trips, but in that early application period, I only applied to Stanford. And I would have been able to find a place where I would have been happy if it didn't work out, but I was really, really set on going to Stanford. So it was extremely validating to receive the acceptance letter from the university, because regardless of what the coaches thought about me coming and playing on the team, the admissions department has their own decision to make. I worked hard in tennis, but I also put in a lot of hours in school to do well on the standardized tests and to take all the AP classes, some of which because I liked it, but some of which because I just knew that that's what you had to do to get into Stanford. So I was extremely relieved and happy, over the moon. I'll always remember getting that package in the mail, and it's gotten even harder to get in since then. Yeah. And I commend anybody who does. But yeah, it was just the culmination of a lot of different paths in my life. So super fond memories of that day.
The likelihood to get in I know is very challenging. And ironically enough, outside of my son's interest in these big schools, when I was coaching high school tennis at Regis Jesuit, I got to coach a young lady by the name of Fran Beliebe, who ended up playing basketball there at Stanford. And she was very similar to the path that you just mentioned, because as much as she was a high school tennis player and then caught on to basketball, she wasn't one of the most elite basketball players in the country. But her parents are both doctors. So she kind of put it upon herself that, hey, you know, if I'm able to get into the school that I want, get the education that I want, be in the environment that I need to be in to go after what I want to go after, that's what I'm going to do. So I commend you, and I tip my hat to you for, despite the unbelievable tennis talent that you were, which we'll dive into, that you had that passion for academics and Stanford, and that's awesome. And I want to kind of go into that last couple years of your career at Stanford, because probably had to lick your wounds and earn your stripes as you got acclimated with the team and heck, acclimated being a student athlete. I'm sure it wasn't easy, you know, the combination of classroom and getting to the courts, but maybe tell the listeners about what it was like to almost be kind of a pseudo walk-on and how it ended up for you your junior and senior year.
Yeah, it's certainly a humbling experience. There are people who are the best at what they do, and they come into a place like Stanford and they're still the best because they're just that much better than everybody else. But that wasn't me. I was very good within a certain bubble, you know, Colorado Intermountain tennis, but I was not the top recruit of my class to go to Stanford tennis. Even I think I was number 4 out of 4 of our freshmen that year. And so you get there, and I was close to the bottom of the roster on the entire team. And so you have to come to terms with the fact that you might not get a lot of matches that year, and your practice sessions might be the only time that you have to get better. So you really have to be committed, I think, to the fact that you can still add value to the team, to not get discouraged by that. Because certainly there are other schools I could have chosen to go to where I would have played high in the lineup immediately. But I didn't choose that path. And I don't regret that. Sometimes I wonder, like, how my game would have ended up differently if I had done that, because obviously you get a lot better when you play matches. But, you know, still, for me to be a part of the program, even if I wasn't in the starting lineup straight away, was worth it. And it was the same thing academically, right? Like I got very good grades in high school, thought I was extremely smart. And I think in hindsight, what I was good at was playing the game, you know, knowing how to study for tests and retain the right information. But when you get to a place like Stanford is when you encounter people in these certain subjects that are the equivalent of what I was in tennis to math or computer science or chemistry or whatever else. And in a way, you're competing with a lot of those people in the classroom, because college classes often are graded on a curve. So I was definitely humbled academically straight away as well. You know, I think I got a D on my first ever math test at Stanford. This is before I even knew what the grade curve was. So I thought I was maybe going to flunk out. I was like, this is way harder than I thought. Ultimately ended up being something like a B with the curve, but still, it was a very jarring experience to me. So I ultimately persevered through those challenges and got more playing time, especially my sophomore year when our team was not as highly ranked. We graduated some seniors. A couple guys didn't come back. We had some injuries. So
who was your coach at the time when you were there?
We had John Whitlinger was the head coach all 4 years. Okay. So Dick Gould had already retired. Yep. And then my freshman and sophomore year, our assistant coach was Dave Hodge.
Yes.
Who had come from CU.
CU, yes. Wow.
That's
right.
And then he left after 2 years to go back to Australia, where he's from, and work with the national team there. And so we got a new assistant coach named Brandon Coop, who is still the assistant coach there today. Yeah, to your point about just where it ended up, my junior and senior years, I was elected captain by my teammates and the coaches for both of those years. Definitely one of my proudest tennis accomplishments. That had less to do with my impact to our team results, because those years our teams were better and I played fewer matches than I did sophomore year. But from a leadership perspective, even the guys who were better than me on the tennis court looked up to me to set the tone for the team of work ethic, positivity, support, you name it, showing up day after day and just trying to get better. So I felt by the end that was really where I was adding the most value, was through the leadership component and making guys better in practice, but not necessarily being the one out to be sent out there to win on the court. I still tried to do that when I did get the opportunity, but it was a lot more rare.
It had to have been fascinating to you to go from, talk about your high school career, but my understanding is 4 consecutive team titles in high school. And as you mentioned, you grew up kind of in an area where, Intermountain tennis, Colorado tennis, you certainly had some success, but you and I both know as you get to SoCal and Texas and international players that it's a whole new ball game. But I find it interesting based off of you not maybe being the impact that you were in high school immediately in college tennis, that eventually you had guys looking up to you your junior and senior year that might have just been better tennis players. What were you doing, not necessarily on the court, but what were the intangibles? You talked about positive energy. You've talked about being able to be an encouragement. What were the things that you were doing that maybe weren't tennis related at all that made such an impact to that group of guys?
2 things come to mind. And the first started my freshman year even, but carried through. And that was the commitment and work ethic that guys witnessed, even though I wasn't getting my shots in the starting lineup, right? Guys know that you can choose to go one of 2 directions. You can choose to either just take it easy, you're not going to play, so hey, maybe you don't need to try so hard in practice or in sprints or whatever else. My freshman year, first week in the fall, we had these fitness tests. And we had been given a summer workout program that we were supposed to follow. And, being the overachiever that I am, I was like, I need to do this. And they were hard. It was weights, it was sprints, it was long distance. And I got there, and throughout the course of the test, kind of maybe saw that not everybody had done those workouts. And there was one particular test called the beep test, which was a sprint test, 2 lines, 20 meters apart or 10 meters. And yes, you have to run back and forth. The beeps get gradually faster, and you go until you can't make the line. And so you start by jogging, and by the end you are sprinting, and there's no finish line until you just can't make it. So I come in freshman year, lowest of the 4 freshman recruits. There's got juniors, seniors on the team who had gotten to deep in the NCAA tournament, and I beat everybody in that test. And I set the team record. Now, some credit goes to coming from Colorado and coming in with a very high blood oxygen count. But the other part of it was just the fact that I had been doing those beep tests over the summer, and I didn't throw in the towel on doing the training program. So I carried that kind of intensity, commitment to fitness, commitment to putting in the work with me throughout my 4 years, and guys saw that. And then the second thing was I especially tried to take the new incoming classes under my wing when they got there. And in some cases, guys who had been private schooled or homeschooled, they didn't really know even how to function in this big, scary school environment. So I helped them get situated with their classes and start thinking about majors and figure out where the best dorms to live in were, and, offered to put in extra time on the court with them if they wanted, right? And I think for a lot of guys, that meant a lot to them, that this older upperclassman would spend his time doing that. And I genuinely liked doing it. I loved connecting with the guys in that way, but I think that also contributed to them, voting me as captain those last 2 years, versus coming in and me just being solely focused on myself.
A lot of relatability for you and I, because I mean, Jeff, despite being a great Colorado tennis player, I know that you weren't the biggest guy in the world growing up. And I can even see you today. I mean, the physical transformation that you had in college is impressive. And I was on the other end of the spectrum. I lost 100 pounds in 13 months. I took a gap year before going to college, spent some time at an academy in Arizona. And that physical, fortitude, especially, going into any aspect of tennis or in life, is key. So I am curious, with that fitness background, what inspired you to take on that passion to be as fit as you possibly could be?
Well, you're right that, I was always very skinny and tall, which those two things can actually play well to being a good tennis player. So it didn't necessarily hold me back at the level that I was competing at in the juniors. But, if you watch the pro game now, or if you compare college to high school tennis, it's a different level of size and power. And for me, it was partially work driven and maybe partially just my body catching up a little bit. But I had a big transformation between my freshman and sophomore years of college, even. So, freshman year of college, I was strong and I was doing well in those sprint tests and all of that, but wasn't necessarily muscular yet. And the summer in between freshman and sophomore year, I competed, I played some tournaments, I came home, I worked, a summer job, and I spent a lot of time in the gym. I did, again, the summer workout program that they gave us to do. And I don't know how many of the other guys were doing it. And I put on, I don't know exactly how many pounds of muscle, but I must have been like upper 150s pounds wise. And then I think I was maybe 170 and quite lean by my sophomore year. And that was the year I was playing my best tennis too. So there were direct payoff results from that. And it's just what you needed to do to compete at that level, because otherwise I was getting powered off the court. Colorado tennis, you can get away with it a little bit because of the high altitude, but going and competing every day in low altitude with guys who were 20 pounds bigger than me and were hitting serves 20 miles an hour faster, I didn't know what my weapons were. Because I wasn't so fast that I was just going to retrieve everything. And I wasn't hitting big enough to win points on my terms at that level. So it was kind of a necessity that I add some bulk to figure out how to win points.
And lastly, with Stanford, when it does come to playing tennis matches, do you have a match that you remember that you would say was one that you can hang your hat on, that you were most proud of?
It's kind of a random one. It wasn't like a big match or big opportunity. I have two from my sophomore year. One was I was playing number 6 singles against, I think it was Arizona at home. I played really well. I was aggressive. I was taking second serves and hitting and coming in, and I just blew the guy off the court. I won like 6-2, 6-2. I think I remember that one because I was the first off the court in a good way.
Yeah, no doubt.
And, because I was not this fixture in the starting lineup, I think guys wouldn't have necessarily predicted that I was going to be the one to win the fastest, but it felt good that I could get another point up on the board for the team quickly. So that one I remember. And then another one I remember from that same year, I was playing as high as number 4 singles, and we were playing Harvard at home. And we ended up losing the team match. It was one that we probably should have won. But because, historically we had mostly beaten them. Anyway, we lost, and I was playing higher than I ever had in the singles lineup, and I found a way to win in 3 sets. And I just remember that one as well, because even though it was a disappointing team result, it felt good that I was being stretched from a lineup perspective and was still able to produce the results, which only happened because, a couple of guys above me lost, a guy or two below me lost. Can't remember if we won the doubles point or not, but certainly that showed where my confidence and, playing level was in those days, because winning at 4 against a school like Harvard is certainly nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, unfortunately, with my days at Northern Colorado, we didn't run into Harvard or Stanford all too often, but nonetheless, what a incredible story. And, it actually makes me think of a Facebook post I came across that you had of an old tennis ball table. And it's fascinating because I have a few tennis balls around my office somewhere, and it's the ones where I won a match in college, and that was a big deal, going from a school that was transitioning from Division II to Division I. And I got another ball from one of my coaching mentors where, and I don't know if you ever did this practice, but you basically start with one brand new tennis ball and you just hit it and see how long you can keep it in play. And we got up to 503. So 1, 2, it's every time you hit the ball. So equally it'd be 1,006 or something, right?
Wow.
And this is when I was right before I lost my weight, and it developed this kind of mental stability in my life. I know, like, I'm always looking at this ball and I'm thinking, like, am I having a 503 mentality right now? Right. Because as much as we've talked about how well of a tennis player you were and the physical transformation, Jeff, you were by far one of the most cerebral players that I got to play against. And I'll never forget that match. Kind of going back to your junior career and backpedaling a little bit to how Stanford happened. I want to get into that, but I remember vividly playing you at Meadow Creek in a tournament in Colorado, and out of nowhere, we're rallying, and you just hit this clean angle that I'm like, how in the world, like, you were the Carlos Alcaraz of the early 2000s hitting the shot, man. And I was barreling my 240-pound body towards that ball, and I not only let it bounce twice, but I hit a 5-gallon water jug that suspended play on 2 courts for the better part of 30 minutes. But man, I would love for you to speak to just the mental side of the game and how, I mean, obviously you're a student. Did you become a student of tennis, and how important was that side?
Huge. Well, first of all, fond memories of our competing days and that tournament specifically. I very much felt at home at Meadow Creek, even though it was not my home club. Just somehow always played well there. And you got to take advantage of those close side nets in indoor tennis. You can win points by driving a guy into the side net. So love those angles. And by the way, I have a similar story of a guy who came in 2 years after me at Stanford. I was playing him in his first week of practice, and I hit angle drop volley. And he was there to show everybody that he wasn't going to give up on a single ball. And he ends up barreling into the umpire chair on the court, knocks it over completely. Play on every court stopped. And guys were just like, who is this guy? The intensity is through the roof. So certainly said something about you and not being, not giving up.
I appreciate that, man. And yeah, it's funny that you had a deja vu moment, and I know you're going to dive into the mental aspect, but did it make you think of the moment when the water jug went over years before that? Like, wow, I've kind of seen this before. This is
Yeah, I mean, you know that,
Uh,
our time in tournament matches is actually such a small fraction of the total time that we spend on the court. So, as much as that would have flashed through my mind, there's probably a half dozen other instances of guys running into the net or jumping over it after chasing down a ball that would have flashed through my mind from just practice sessions too, because that's where some of the most competitive or most competition comes out, I guess, is in even those practice matches.
right.
But for the mental side, I would say it wasn't something that came naturally to me when I was much younger, like 10, 11, 12. I was always very, very competitive. It was tough to lose. And even when you win a match, you are losing 40 to 50% of the points. So I had to be coached and learn and go through a transition period and a maturing period when I was younger to really understand that the mental side of the game was critical to producing results through like formal mental training programs geared at, younger athletes.
Up that a little bit because from my understanding, you come from obviously a lineage of great tennis players. When I was on the podcast with Dick Gould, he spoke a lot about Trinity College, and there's a lot of, bloodline of great tennis from there. And I believe your mom played at CU. You just had a lot of lineage to learn from. But the sport psychology part is interesting because I know there's a lot of incredible sport psychologists that are here locally in Colorado and obviously around the country. But maybe could you speak to not only the sports psychologists you're gonna talk about, but just the folks that fed into you that help you learn the game of tennis?
Yeah, absolutely huge. Like I was given one of the best starts possible, right? I was given, just handed to me, a head start because of the fact that my family was big into tennis already, and I happened to fall in love with the same sport. So my mom and both of her brothers played Colorado tennis growing up. They were very good in the juniors. They all three played collegiate tennis. One of my uncles then went and played on the professional tour for a while. And after that, he stayed in tennis. He was coaching a national team. He was coaching professional players, including Jeff Salzenstein, who was on here. So, and yes, my uncles played at Trinity, which at that time was a top 5 school in the country. So I came in with being around the game of tennis from the age of 4 or 5. We ran a summer tennis camp in first Boulder and then Greeley that I would go to every single summer for multiple weeks. And that's because my family was the one running it. So I just had exposure to the game early on. And I also had the benefit of my mom being my coach early on, having someone who played when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, who can actually teach you how to swing the racket is huge. And then once I started competing at 10, 11, 12, I transitioned to my uncle being my coach, and he had worked with players at the highest level. So from a stroke development standpoint, it was absolutely massive because I was getting good coaching from the very beginning. But then, to connect it to the mental side, there was also knowledge and recognition of where my deficiencies were that they could help me realize and help push me in the right direction. I don't think that many 12-year-olds would have the maturity to step back and realize that, hey, this is a problem area for me. Let me go seek out the resources I can to make it better. You need people in your corner who are telling you, look, this is not, first of all, it's not acceptable behavior. You're making yourself look bad if you're getting mad or moping around the court or throwing your racket or whatever it is. Let's seek some solutions. Let's start with what you can control, and then let's go find other people out there who can help take you the rest of the way. So I definitely would credit, my overall support system for helping bring me to that point, because I don't think that I would have gotten there on my own. And then there's just there's a few key lessons and messages that were drilled into my head over and over from these people, my uncle specifically, who had been there and who had been in these high pressure situations. And one key message was control what you can control. And that's it. You can't control how well the other person is playing. You can't control the weather conditions, and it's not exactly how you like to play or whatever else. And that's a really simple thing to keep you focused. So that was huge. And then the other one, which I certainly wouldn't have gotten to on my own, was, to try to develop this competition alter ego to help yourself get into the peak performance state, or, to be in the zone. You need these mind tricks where you can adopt this competitive persona that blocks out everything around you and is solely focused on bringing the best out of yourself.
Right.
And focusing on those two kind of mantras was massive for me, and I think allowed me to probably produce results higher than my natural abilities would have dictated.
Yeah, one of the best mentors that I came across in my life was a gentleman by the name of Scott Ford, and he has a technique of learning how to use your eyes, kind of developed a system of figuring out ways to be present, because in tennis, in any fast-moving ball sport, and in athletics in general, there's a lot of things to get distracted by, right? And when you see people that are in the zone, like you said, it's almost like they're in a state consciously where it's almost like a subconscious state, and it's not you watch the best players in any respective sport doing what they're doing, especially in slow motion, it doesn't look like they're working very hard. And I'm always teaching that if you make it look hard, you're easy to beat. If you make it look easy, you're hard to beat. And that type of keeping it simple, I think, has really resonated with me with what you're saying. Is in any aspect of life, we can overcomplicate things. But if we can keep it simple and be present and control your controllables, that's what leads to a tremendous amount of success. And I mean, obviously you talked about the lineage, you talked about a lot of great support system that were around you throughout your junior career, Jeff, but can you maybe speak to fast forward a little bit to Cherry Creek High School? I'm a Colorado native. I went to Ponderosa High School, and I've it was right around the time of Chad Harris and Bo Berglund, and just some crazy, amazing, awesome tennis coming from there. My high school coach, actually, Kerry Lacouture, played at Creek. Yeah. And it was something that when I got out of college and decided I wanted to be a high school coach, I went on mission to figure out a way to take down that team. So I haven't
Did you
done
do it?
Not yet. We finished second last year. I don't know if you knew this, but Colorado high school tennis changed the state format, so it's a little bit different now, but nonetheless, we are aligning well in August to give it another run. But nonetheless, you were part of 4 state championship teams, but if I remember, you were playing on that team at the highest level, number 1 singles, and your individual success wasn't always maybe what you wanted it to be. Can you speak to what it was like to, one, play number 1 singles at Cherry Creek High School as a freshman, and 2, what were those 4 years like, and maybe some of the guys you came across that got in the way of your individual success?
I had a tremendous amount of pride to play Cherry Creek tennis because I mentioned my family had done the same. We had a lot of family history tied to the school, not only through the tennis program, but also my grandmother worked in the registrar's office. One of my uncles was a teacher there, and he had been the tennis coach for a decade plus earlier in life. So we were super tied to that program. It was never really a question that I was going to play, because some people make decisions to skip the season, go compete, go to an academy, whatever. For me, it was always just a given that I was going to play high school tennis in Colorado. And I had some lofty goals to try to attain. My uncle, who I mentioned that played on the Pro Tour, he holds some kind of record in Colorado tennis because he won 4 individual singles state titles. Freshman year at number 3 singles, and then sophomore, junior, senior year at number 1 singles. And
so he won 4 consecutive.
Yeah, individual titles, and then they won the team title as well. And he was only number 3 his freshman year because his older brother was a senior and was number 1, and there was another senior who was number 2. And by the way, this same uncle recently just got inducted into the Cherry Creek High School Athletics Hall of Fame.
That's
so
awesome.
I was just born into it, right? I didn't do anything to deserve that. I certainly tried to take advantage of that head start. So I always had the goal to play number 1 because both uncles had played number 1 at one point. My mom played number 1 on the women's team at one point. So that was my goal. And the other goal was to continue the streak.
Yep.
There was a lot of talk in our family because my uncles were a part of the teams that really started the streak back in the 70s, but they had this 25-ish year streak of not losing a dual match. And that also included not losing state. They lost one time in state in the 90s. As you mentioned, it was just based on individual results, but they didn't lose a dual match that year. So the dual match streak was still going.
I see.
Well, my 8th grade year, the team had a bit of a down year compared to what they were used to having, and they ended up losing the dual match. And so this streak that I was really looking forward to continuing was erased.
Man.
And so it gave me a new purpose to try to start a new streak. And we did. My 4 years, we went undefeated in dual matches. We won the team title all 4 years. And playing number 1 singles from freshman year on is definitely one of my prouder tennis accomplishments. But as you said, it's not as glamorous as it would seem because you end up taking a lot more losses than the rest of the team. The reason that we won the titles that we did is because of our depth.
Yeah.
I was just looking back at some old results, and there was a year or two where Regis was really close, and we didn't win any singles titles. But our doubles teams, our depth is why we won the state title. And they were really the ones who carried us. And so my freshman year, I lost in the state tournament in, I think, the quarterfinals to Paul Kinke, who is the exact same year as me at Denver East. We played dozens of times in tournaments growing up. And I was the only person on the team who didn't make it past the first 2 days of the tournament. Like I was just out. I was sitting and watching while the rest of my team was playing. And then sophomore year, I made it to the semifinals, got 3rd place. That year we were especially good. And I was the only person who didn't win the title at their position. We won 2-3 singles. We won 1 through 4 doubles. So it was great. We won the title, right? But you still take a little bit of a hit to the ego when you're the reason that the team didn't fully sweep. But I still was committed to trying to keep improving my results. And some of the players who beat me would graduate. And so then by my junior year, I improved my results slightly, and I got to the finals and lost to Richard Johnson, who you had on your podcast. Great tennis player, 2-time champion. And yeah, he was just a level above me, right? It would have been a major upset if I had won that match. And then my senior year, that really felt like the time to try to accomplish the ultimate goal of winning the number 1 singles state title,
right?
Which I was very fortunate to do. It was an epic match in the finals, again against Paul Kinke. So we had this full circle moment of playing freshman year in the tournament and then again senior year. And it was a crazy match. I was down match points. The team title was wrapped up. So it was really all just about my own personal goals at that point. And I have very fond memories of that. But I'm equally as proud of us winning the team title those 4 years. I was happy to be the one to take the lumps at the top so that some of our other guys could more easily win championships at their position.
Yeah, it's walking through that is fascinating because there's some big names that you came across, and to have it kind of culminate to that senior year. And listen, I'm more of a friendly, competitive spirit when it comes to Creek, but I definitely deeply respect the history. And I had no idea you had so many tentacles wrapped into that. And I just have to ask, when you got to that moment, senior year, the match is over, and you're standing there and you know that your high school career is over. What were some of the things that you were thinking about or reflecting on in that moment? Because listen, that's one of the most decorated high school tennis careers that a lot of people would love to have. And I'm just curious what was on your mind in the moment.
The next step, college tennis, I think, and
Awesome.
completing my junior career. You know, I mentioned that playing for Stanford tennis was this thing that I had been fixated on since I was 12 years old. The state championship was in October of my senior year, and I hadn't yet at that time received my acceptance to Stanford yet. So I didn't know yet for sure where I was going to go to college. I think, if I have the timing right. So, you know, as important as the high school tennis season was to me, what was more important was this overarching goal that I had. And so I think I was still nervous and anxious about whether that was going to come true. And then, you know, as you competed in yourself, there's just a year-round circuit of tournaments for Colorado and Intermountain and nationals that I quickly turned my attention to. So I savored the moment, and, you know, my parents saved newspaper clippings and stuff from that time. It was really awesome to experience and kind of continue the family tradition in that way. But pretty soon after that, I would have been getting on a plane to go play a tournament in Utah or California or whatever else. And you learn to put those results in the past pretty quickly, whether it's win or lose, because there's always another tournament around the bend. And, you know, I mentioned Paul as the person who I played in that finals. We were also doubles partners with each other in Intermountain and national level tournaments. And our results went back and forth our entire career. So even though I got him on that day, he got me a lot of times in other tournaments in singles, and he had a pretty stellar year that year in the nationals, right? So on both sides, right, there was surely disappointment on his end, but then he went and had this amazing summer in nationals. On my end, there was celebration of winning that title, but not as good results in the national level. So there's always these things out there to balance you out and humble you. Luckily, if you're in it for the right reasons and you just love the sport and you love competing, then both the losses and the wins don't take up more space and energy than they should. And you just keep trying to get better every single day.
Well said. And it makes me also think about one of your character traits that has been acknowledged many times, I know at the state level, and I believe at the national level as well, when you're playing as a junior, is your sportsmanship. And, you know, in today's tennis era, especially in junior tennis, there is an epidemic of poor sportsmanship. There's some interesting attitudes that I've come across. There's some interesting line calls that I've come across. I saw one recently that was posted of a national level event where a 13th kid in the country was, you know, trying to close out a guy that was 30th in the country, and it was 30-40, and you clearly see in the video that the ball was in, and the lower ranked player calls it out, and there's a little bit of kind of confrontation as they're going up to shake hands because the other player was like clearly in. He's trying to handle it, at least like make a point, right? But nonetheless, I believe you were a two-time sportsmanship recipient, and it was maybe more than that, and probably had to stretch that more when you got into some of your national tournaments, and especially in college, because college, it's a fascinating element of sportsmanship, especially when you're playing against international players. And listen, everyone's fighting for spots, fighting for scholarships, and there's just more on the line. But nonetheless, I'd love for you to speak to sportsmanship, how it was instilled, and maybe what sportsmanship means to you today in the business world.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few things there. First, on the line call stuff, that's always been a challenge. It was a challenge for me in, I guess it would have been the late 90s, even playing junior nationals and feeling like I got hooked at various points. I am very optimistic that, you know, these advances in technology and automated line calling will eventually make their way down to the competitive junior level and maybe even the recreational club level at some point. Bottom line is calling lines are hard. The ball is moving fast. You're trying to focus on hitting the ball while also looking exactly where it landed. Unless you're playing on clay, there's not a clear mark left, so you might just see it. So I think overall the game will be improved if units that can be attached to net posts these days that can help make line calls. So I'm very optimistic that over the next couple of decades, it's going to be a different story. Fingers crossed for that.
If not, there's always pickleball, right?
I'm surprised there's not more line issues in pickleball.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
They got pretty skinny lines, and the ball, you're playing on hard court, so it doesn't leave a mark. Like, I'm actually surprised there's not more drama there. But, to the larger point about sportsmanship, I think I ultimately matured to the point where I did recognize that the way that I acted in the early part of my junior career was not who I wanted to be as a person and not how I wanted to be looked at. Part of that is my personality and just liking to be liked. And so I didn't ever want to create enemies on the court. As I mentioned to you, I'm very competitive, so I wanted to win. So there's a balance there. But to me, if there were tension-filled moments on a court in the heat of the moment, that wasn't something that I was going to hold a grudge about. It wasn't something that I was going to seek to get even on. And ultimately, as we also talked about earlier, my mental game was the place where I felt like I could have an edge over other players if maybe the physical parts weren't getting me 100% of the way there. So why would I give any advantage or any points away if I could avoid it? So being a good sport and having a more stoic persona was as much about who I wanted to be as a person, but also it fed into my competitiveness. If I felt like I would win more matches because I acted that way, then that was very much in my interests to do so. I also idolized guys like Sampras and Federer, and that was just their persona on the court, was not a ton of emotion, let the racket do the talking. So a lot of it can be traced back to just who I looked up to and resonated with. But it was also a message that was drilled into me by my family and the people around me, because that's how they liked to conduct themselves on the court too. And when you come from a tennis family, your behavior on the court is not just reflective on you, it's also reflective on the whole family. So if I would have continued that type of behavior, I think I would have been talked to very strongly, because my family did a lot to build their own legacy and reputation within Colorado tennis, and they're not going to let a little punk like me mess that up. So
absolutely, the importance of sportsmanship, but to know that you're representing a family legacy. You are being brutally honest there, and maybe if you didn't have that support system around you, the sportsmanship might have maybe been different. But nonetheless, just an exceptional junior career, unbelievable high school career, going then to be a two-time captain at Stanford, getting the education that you want. I want to dive quickly into the business world. I mean, Jeff, your resume is insane. It's, Stanford undergrad, an MBA from Harvard, where I believe that was a nice piece of paper to get, but the better one was meeting your now wife, I understand, and having a family now, and gosh, ESPN, internship at Apple, a lot of name dropping that a lot of people would covet to have those opportunities. Can you maybe just speak to how tennis and, relationship building and all of the tangibles that you've built through college have crossed over into the business world, and what that path has meant to you so far today to be involved in all the various entities that you've been in, because it truly is fascinating.
You're right that there are a lot of household name brands on that resume. I think that that's how I learned to operate, in the sense that part of the reason why I want to go to Stanford since I was 12 is, at the time when I was just getting really big into tennis, they were the best. I was 12 in 1998. That was at the end of their 4-year streak, Stanford, of winning 4 championships in a row. Also, Stanford had the reputation of being the best in academics. So if you're a 12-year-old kid, of course you like the best, so why not try to go for the best of the best? It's the same with choosing which professional sports team you like. If you're 12 years old, you're probably going to like the team that won the championship last year. So I would say, some of those other decisions of where to work were partially driven by the same motivation, in the sense that I felt like just by working at those places, I would feel proud to work there because other people knew the name of the company, or the company was making a product that people liked and enjoyed.
Yeah.
There is an aspect to that, right? A lot of people do remember where I work or know where I worked, versus if you work at a company that people are less familiar with, it might not come up in conversation as much because people don't know it. But I wouldn't necessarily equate that to the right way, because it's also about fulfillment in your day-to-day work at the end of the day. And that's something I'm still searching for. I had this very clear vision of Stanford tennis being my ultimate goal, and I knew the exact steps to get there, but there might be others out there who, like me, actually struggled a lot with the transition into the professional world because I didn't have a clear vision of where I wanted to be. I didn't know what industry I wanted to be in. I didn't know what job function I was good at. I didn't really have a strong feeling about where I would want to be located. And some of my career path reflects that. I've jumped around a little bit. I've been in different cities. I've been in different industries. And part of that is just me searching for finding that type of job that connects and resonates with me to the same degree that pursuing excellence in tennis resonated with me. Because that came easy. There was never any question that that's what I wanted to do. As we sit here today, and as I'm, in between jobs and looking for my next role, I wish I had a clearer answer about where that will be. So I'm trying to be patient with it. And I think tennis does teach you that certain years you're going to have better results than others. And it's important not to give up after a bad year. And I think it goes the same in the career side as well, right? If you have a job that you like, but maybe is not 100% fulfilling, it's worth it to be patient and keep searching for something that's even better of a fit for you. So that's how I'm trying to approach it. And as far as the connection to just sportsmanship or general kind of relationship building in business can be a very competitive place as well, just like sports. And there can often be winning and losing.
Yep.
I tend more towards wanting to have positive relationships with the people that I work with, even if the outcome for myself is not as good as it could have been if I chose to screw them over or be competitive or whatever the decision would be in the moment.
Right.
And that probably means there's a ceiling on my results as a business person compared to someone who is hyper competitive and who's going to do everything to position themselves to make money or whatever other scorecard you want to use. And that's okay with me. I would rather have a career that I feel good about how I conducted myself and feel good about the relationships that I built, even if it means that I don't end up being the richest person in the world, if that's how you measure success in business.
Being able to put your head on your pillow at night, knowing that you've maintained your values and what you believe in, is something that can't be quantified with a dollar amount, right? And speak to, your family. I know that you got two little ones and your wife. I'd love to know if they are inspiring tennis players, or what are kind of some of the activities you guys are doing in back east.
Oh yeah, we play a lot of tennis. By the way, on the previous point, I'm not saying that the people who do succeed in business have had to compromise their morals. That's
right.
Not always the case.
I understand that, yeah.
But they have to sacrifice in a lot of places in their life, whether it's time that they put in or time away from family or whatever else. So ultimately, you just have to get comfortable with the amount that you're willing to sacrifice for a certain outcome. And for me, I don't necessarily want to sacrifice everything for the sake of the business outcome. I want to retain time with family. I want to retain those good relationships. And so that's just personal choice. And with that personal choice and with the time with family, you know, one of my more recent joys is sharing the game of tennis with my family. My wife, who I met in business school, like you said, she's Polish. She didn't play tennis really growing up, but since we started dating and then got married and had kids, she's gotten really into the game of tennis. She loves it. We go out and hit with each other. She's having a moment right now because Polish tennis is at the top on the professional side with Iga Świątek and Hubie Hurkacz on the men's side. So she's loving that. And then my son, who's 2.5, I'm of course biased, but he seems to have a tremendous natural ability for racket sports. He's always like, we've had a racket in his playroom since he was born, not because we put it there, because he just likes it. He likes swinging at the ball. He's got really great timing, good hand-eye coordination. So as he's gotten older, I've loved sharing the game more with him, tossing balls to him so he can swing, sharing in the joy that he gets when he connects and really hits a great ball, having tennis on TV at home when the Grand Slams are on, and trying to explain stuff to him. And I hope to do the same with my daughter when she's a little bit older. She's just over 1. Wow. We live in New York, and our local neighborhood club is the West Side Tennis Club, which is where the U.S. Open was held until 1977. So it's this beautiful historic club. It has nearly 40 courts, including 11 grass courts, which I had played almost no grass until we moved to this club.
Really? You didn't play any grass? I played a qualifier at the Tennis Hall of Fame in Newport, Rhode Island. My uncle lives in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Nice. And yeah, it's a server's big forehands paradise on the grass.
Yeah. A lot of short points. But yeah, I never played any junior tournaments that were grass, and collegiately we didn't have anything grass, and I never pursued any ITF or pro level tournaments where I would have played on it. So it was all brand new to me. There certainly are no grass courts in Colorado. It's mostly an East Coast thing. So it's been really fun to discover that part of the game. I've always loved the watching on the grass. Like Wimbledon has been my favorite tournament to watch. If you're a Sampras Federer fan, of course, that's going to be true. But it's also just fun now to have the history in the club. My uncle, who I mentioned earlier, he competed and played at Forest Hills in the U.S. Open when he was on the Pro Tour. So it's really fun when my family comes and visits. I can give them a tour of how the club has changed, and they still got pictures on the wall of the clubhouse of all the old champions dating back to the 1800s. So I'm still very much in love with the sport of tennis. I love to play. There's a group of ex-college guys that I play with regularly, and I continue to plan to be involved in the sport throughout my life. Playing recreationally, introducing it to my kids, who knows, maybe even working in the industry one day. I don't plan on moving on from the sport of tennis. I definitely think it's a lifelong thing for me.
Yeah, a couple small world moments again. When I made that academy decision after high school, it was actually a connection through Paul Benzinski, a former Cherry Creek grad. And my two coaches were from Poland. Robert Wojciech played at South Carolina, and his English wasn't very good back then. He could only really say 2 words, and it was run and then the S word. So for 13 months, I got to hear those 2 words consecutively for quite a bit of time, but nonetheless, learning the European training was a significant benefit to my tennis game, and really just the mental fortitude, the discipline of the Polish culture, I have a deep amount of respect for. Speaking of the tennis, keeping the foot in the tennis career, Richard Johnson, when I spoke to him, I tip my hat to him because he's very active in the Boulder tennis community. Obviously, his wife played at CU, and he gets to hit tennis balls with Andreas Seppi and helping him with a travel program for his kind of post-career. And I just love hearing guys that have been an impact in Colorado tennis that still find a way to keep their foot in it, because, listen, tennis is a lifelong sport for a reason, and to continue to do it in community is awesome. And it leads to one last question for you, Jeff, is listen, in your young life now, being a dad and a husband and all the accolades that you've had in tennis, seeing some of it in your background here on Zoom, it's just an unbelievable career. I can't stress that enough. But I also believe that you've seen a lot and gained a lot of perspective as you've gone through your journey. And what I would love to hear is if you had an opportunity to flash back to 16-year-old Jeff Zeller and who you are now, you get the opportunity to sit at a Starbucks in Greenwood Village, Colorado, and talk to 16-year-old Jeff. What advice would you give him knowing what you know now?
Well, thank you for the compliment, first of all. I certainly feel proud about my competitive tennis career, and who knows, maybe I'll keep playing tournaments in my adult years. Was just talking with Paul last week, who is now playing national 35s tournaments.
Oh, wow.
And did really well. He got second place at the Hardcore Nationals recently. So
Wow.
there's still hope for us who never went and played on the pro tour to still get that competitive itch out through tennis and earn some of those USTA gold ball trophies that eluded us back in the day. But yeah, I think I would tell my 16-year-old self to not put so much pressure on myself, that doing it because you want to do it is the right motivation, but doing it because you think that the expectations of the people around you are that you need to achieve XYZ, that just puts kind of unnecessary pressure on you. You can get tricked into thinking that people like or respect you because of your accomplishments rather than because of who you are as a person. And you feel good about the accomplishments that you have when you look back, but I think you feel better about focusing on the things that truly mattered to you versus doing it because you think that that's what you're supposed to do. To make it specific, I always wanted to do well in academics and well in tennis. That's a lot to try to do at the same time.
Right.
And I needed to have really good grades to get into Stanford, and so that justified the work. But I also felt a lot of pressure to achieve a certain GPA in college, when in the end, it doesn't really mean that much as long as you learn skills that are transferable. So I felt more pressure than I needed to achieve that GPA when nobody around me cared at all what that GPA ended up being. It never comes up in conversation. And it's like, I was proud of it at the time a little bit, but probably not enough to even justify the work that went in. So just really trying to be as honest with yourself as possible about why you're doing something. Make sure that you're doing it for you, not for your parents or your friends or people who follow you on social media to live up to some expectations that you don't even know if they're true or not, because you might just be projecting those expectations in the first place. So I think that leads to a most happy, fulfilled life, is if every decision that you make comes from the right place within yourself.
Well said, Jeff. And just to give you some additional kudos, the BTB project does not exist unless I have people like yourself in my life. I know that it might have been just a small grain of salt back in the day, but that moment of sportsmanship when we got to play against one another and just my indirect times talking to you and getting to know people that knew you well, you did it the right way, and you ignited a flame in my competitive spirit to know that I can do anything that I set my mind to, do it the right way, do it with humility, do it with grace. And it's impacted a lot of people's lives. The BTB project, the journey, I reflect more on the process and the progress than I do any sort of accolade. From talking to you a little bit, I get that same sense. It's more about that reflection of it's not always about the big name, the trophy in the background. It's about who you are and why you're doing it. I cannot thank you enough for your time on the BTB project today. Jeff, thank you so much for joining.
Of course. Thank you, Coleman. Thank you, listeners.
Excellent. There's certainly a lot we can learn from Jeff and his journey. It's important to understand as the listeners, it is our responsibility to control our controllables. Listen, whether it's in athletics or in life, peak performance is always going to be tapped into by staying present, controlling the controllables, and to continue to find ways to move forward and persevere. I appreciate you checking out Project Podcast today. As mentioned earlier, like, subscribe, send this over to a friend that you think would encourage them. I appreciate you as a listener. Impossible's nothing, and take care.